everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm trying out a product that I have seen advertised for I think a year at this point. And I'm curious. My curiosity has been piqued and I want to see what it's all about. So I've been seeing all these advertisements for the Woobles, and they claim to be a very easy to work with kit. The very back here just says, meet your next hobby. Not crafty, not coordinated, nonsense. This kit is for anyone picking up a crochet hook for the first time. The magic is giving you more than the materials. It's the wee woobly things we do to make sure you're good to go. Like a pre-started piece and step-by-step videos to make your own Sebastian line, which is the one that I chose. By the end of it, you won't just have a cute little friend, you also have a new lifelong skill and the confidence that comes along with it. It claims to be done in 3 to 8 hours. I admit that I am not the target audience for this, because I'm not a brand new crocheter. I've been crocheting for, I want to say, at least a decade now. So I ended up choosing the one that had the most frills available at the local Joann's to see if they explain stuff. Now, I'm also going to be taking the path of I'm going to do the bare minimum, so if they tell me to do it, I do it. The bare minimum here is I'm not one who typically goes out to search out the instructions. I just try to figure it out. So we'll see how much I can get by on this, yeah. So it says step-by-step videos. I'm hoping the instructions aren't solely in video format, because if I'm being quite honest here, when it comes to making patterns, I don't sit and watch through a whole video most of the time. Most of the time I look for written patterns. That's why I have a bookshelf. Yeah. So I'm hoping there's some like written instructions in here. I'm pretty sure they're not giving me a device. The one thing I can say is their graphics are on point. Very cute. It feels nice. Unfortunately, I don't think this is a recyclable material, but it feels nice. So I guess part of this is also making sure that it actually contains everything that it says it does. I found that with kits, usually when I do a kit, something doesn't go as far as it should. Or something missing, or they give me too much something, like the proportions are off. So I'm wondering if that's going to happen with this as well. There's this little thing right here. It says tear here to start woobling. So we're going to wooble. I keep thinking of like this advertisement for weevils. It's like weevils wobble but they don't fall down. It's like woobles wobble but they don't fall down. They probably can't say that because it's trademarked. It's weird, like it's sealed up here but it goes all the way out here. So this would make a terrible popsicle. Not that it wants to be a popsicle. Ah! This is t-shirt yarn. This is like softer parachute cord. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, kind of, maybe. There's like a fabric around a cotton insert, which is not most yarn. Most yarn is literally just like strings plied together. We have our orange, have the white, have the black, have the yellow. I'm wondering where this pre-started piece is. This is our crochet hook. Ooh! Okay, this is a nice ergonomic hook. I'm trying to think of an appropriate association for this feel. Silicone. This feels like silicone. Okay. This is a 4mm hook. Most of my 4mm hooks look like this, because most of my hooks were gifted to me by someone else. Or I got the hooks as part of a kit. So this actually doesn't break the pattern. This is an interesting feel for the hook. It'll be interesting to see how this feels using it. It feels pretty good so far. My grandmother, when she was still alive, actually had a piece of foam that she wrapped with masking tape, and that was her handle for her hook. I still have that, actually. And even though it's trash, I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of it because it was hers. Then we have our little stuffing. It's what's inside that counts. Oh, nice little sticker there. It's what's inside that counts. It's a little stuffing. So this kind of gives me a size for how big I expect the wooble to be, which is like about that. I expect to be able to cup the wooble with my hands. That is all that's inside the bag. This says instructions inside. Oh, the wee wobbly bits. This is handy. The marketing team on this is amazing, okay? Because look at this. Like, I got the kit for Sebastian the lion. The sticker is of Sebastian. Like, Sebastian is what's poking out here. It's a very enticing marketing strategy. I commend them for that. Here's something that can make him break it. Woo. Okay. Okay. So meet Sebastian. I go get the code. I was hoping to actually have like a little paper thing. I know it may not be environmentally friendly, but they also have the safety eyes and the needles here. Ooh. So they have 3 safety eyes here. And this would have been one of my biggest make or breaks. Would have been if they had forgotten this part. If they had forgotten this part of the safety eye, I automatically would not in good conscience be able to recommend them. But they included it, so they're still in the clear. That's the part of the safety eye that makes it safe. I'll slide that back in because I don't need that right now. But they gave me 3, which honestly smart. It can be very easy to make a mistake with the safety eye. So if they make a mistake with the safety eye right off the bat, they don't have to worry about it. Because they included 3, even if you just use the 2 safety eyes, you still have 1 left. And if you end up buying another Woobles kit and they do the same thing, well, then you have an extra pair of safety eyes out of that. Also, my instinct is you could use it to make the nose, but looking at the picture of Sebastian here, it looks like you are sewing Sebastian's nose. It looks like a sewing detail. But the thing that derailed my thought earlier is I just found our pre-started circle with 3 stitch markers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a magic circle with 6. Oh, and also I've been holding a needle. This is a big needle, just for reference sake. This is my typical needle that I use. It's like a full centimeter bigger. And it's slightly thicker too. It's still blunt, which I appreciate the fact that it's blunt. Because with yarn, you don't really want something super sharp, otherwise it could snag. You save that for like cross stitch and embroidery and whatnot. Anyway, I now have to go to woobles.com and get the little guide for Sebastian because it is a foam pattern. So I'll be back once I've done all the technological googly gook. I now have the pattern pulled up on the phone, or at least a little bit pulled up on my phone. It seems like it's going to pull me through it row by row. There was an option just to go straight for the pattern, and honestly, I should have just done that. I was curious how they were going to explain some of this stuff. So, let's start with this magic ring that they made. To put it bluntly, they made it idiot-proof. It's always nice when something is idiot-proof. So, I don't know if you can tell here. This isn't just a magic circle. They did an extra knot right here that I'm not supposed to take out. So that way, if someone at home makes a mistake, they can just pull the yarn and frog it up until this part, and it says until it won't go anymore. Well, you can't frog this because they did some other sort of twisty knot with it, and I don't know how they did it, and it's so clever. They gave me the 3 stitch markers here, and they told me to hold it with the different stitch marker facing up. So clever that they purposely... Like, this must be a human putting this stuff in, because, I mean, there's no such thing as a crochet machine. At least not yet. Because, like, unlike knitting, where you're just pulling loops through loops through loops, crocheting, you're making a knot each time. On a side note, if you're buying something crochet-wise that is really, really cheap, kind of question about whether the person's getting paid for properly. There was, like, a whole video of how to hold the hook in the yarn, and they honestly went through a whole explanation of how you like wrap the yarn around your pinky. I think it's like this, and then you bring it like that, probably as a way to help keep tension with your piece. That was something I never learned how to do because I was self-taught and I kind of just stumbled through it. But also something else that they mentioned was they said leave this in the back of the work. Usually when I'm crocheting, I will bring this to the front of my work because the way I expect is I usually work with the wrong side facing me and then I have it curve up. So if I have this in like this, it doesn't really do anything, but we're going to trust what they say. And here it says, I'm at the thing for round 2 right now. And they have these helpful YouTube videos all throughout. Like all these embedded videos are on YouTube, so you don't necessarily have to be on their website in order to use it. And they do have tips. And the tips are sometimes articles, sometimes another YouTube video. So they are doing all that they can to set you up for success here without actually being there in person with you. It explains here how you go from 6 to 12 stitches, which for me would be like, well, duh, but most people are not like me. Yeah, so I'm just going to do this row. It looks like I have to do the pattern as it goes along. And I'll check back in when I made a little bit more progress. It's only been like 2 rows, but there's already been a lot at this point. I learned something new today. It's actually not so much learning something new as having the suspicion confirmed. So here they had me just put like the yarn tail here, and I was like, I really don't want to have to weave in that later. It turns out that they want me to flip my piece like this and then start crocheting in a clockwise direction, which takes care of the yarn tail, but I don't typically do that. I use, like, when it starts forming its way into a bowl, I just stick with it. And to be honest, the wrong side and the right side of crochet doesn't really look all that different. It's not like knitting where you like look at the one side versus the other side if you're doing stockinette and you go like, yeah, it doesn't. So actually, let me look at something that I know I've crocheted. Yeah, so remember him? Looking at this, I guess I made the duck inside out, which could explain some troubles I had earlier this past month. Now again, I don't really see the wrong side as inherently wrong, so I'm probably still going to crochet like that. Also, they had me move the stitch markers, so something that they mentioned with the stitch marker is they say it goes in the very first stitch of the round. I've gotten in the habit of putting it in the last stitch of the round, which honestly is right next to the first stitch. However, I've gotten myself to the point where I've mentally trained myself to just see the stitch marker and know that's the last stitch of the round. If I'm about to do the last stitch and it's through the stitch marker, I'm done. So to actually move the stitch marker to the first stitch of the round, it's doing some mind gymnastics for me here. I'm having to constantly remind myself that it's in the first stitch of the round, but we're trying to be good and actually follow instructions for once. This is like one of the good little details, like with the poppy thing, that you only really learn from experience. You only know from someone telling you, because like if you learn it by yourself without anyone explaining to you like I did, no one's going to tell you that, and you're going to have to figure it out over time. Okay, so now I have this yellow beehive, and now I have commentary. There are like large sections where they actually took the steps to bring you further and further into reading a pattern, which I really appreciated. I mean, that is a no stress way of learning how to read a pattern. They're literally guiding you like you're a toddler to get through this. But they're not talking down to you like a toddler. I do want to make that distinction. But I could argue that you can go one step further. That Woobles could have gone one step further with this. So I'm having to read this pattern on a computer. I'm having to read this pattern on a touchscreen. So they could make it so I could, kind of like what Ribblr does, where I can click on the row when I'm done and it marks the row as done. Because I have resorted to drawing a graph of the rows that I'm doing and marking them off, which is something that I don't typically mind doing, but for something that's trying to make this as idiot-proof as possible, that's another step that you could do. It did come with everything that it promised. It said the only other thing that you need are scissors, but I know what I'm like, and I'm pretty sure there are other people who crochet who are like me in this regard, in that I'm going to forget what row I'm on. So I want some sort of like clicker like this guy to be inside my kit, and so I can keep track of the rows, because that's something that's going to come forward. And honestly, this is like a $9 clicker. It would affect the price of the kit if it did it, but there are other stitch markers available that are cheaper. I'm thinking about the ones that are like on top of knitting needles. And I'll insert a picture of that here. And like that could just be like a cheap little thing to make sure that you keep track of the rows. Either that or cheaper would be adding that to your website. Also, they had a description for the invisible decrease, which I finally had an explanation of how the invisible decrease is different from the regular decrease. To be honest, all my decreases on here right now are invisible decreases. But I tried one of my regular decreases on here, and the invisible decrease stands out more. I don't know if that's just a me thing, but honestly, you can go with a regular decrease. You don't have to use the invisible decrease because the regular decrease doesn't really show anyway. And now it's showing how to put in safety eyes, which it wants me to put them in properly, which I'm really thankful they're teaching this because this was something I think I watched a YouTube video explaining it maybe. But it was something I kind of just had to stumble on for myself. Yeah, I kind of had to figure this out for myself. So I count 6 rows down, which they are counting the starting magic ring as a row. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I stick that in there. And once it's 6 stitches apart, so I stick the other guy in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's good. I don't really have to worry about this being not symmetrical because it's a ball. Although it is a little bit rougher at this point, but it did vindicate me that I've been putting these on correctly. Now I do have a tool that I bought to make this easier, but this tool would not be able to make it inside. Ooh, it clicked. Apparently you still can't give these safety eyes to someone under 3. I've already broken that rule. Unfortunately. They also just mentioned that you can embroider eyes. They have a little line with the link saying to embroider the eyes. So if I click on it, it has a little thing on how to embroider on crochet, which is pretty handy. You can stuff it. They have a video on how to stuff it. But I have literally been stuffing things since I was 5 years old, so I don't think I need a video on that. The little eyes are in for our lion. Rawr. Well, it doesn't have its mouth yet, so it can't quite roar, but it can smize, yeah? It's like, Look, I know I'm not the sexiest person. I know I'm like one of the few people who can pull this off and fully embrace the corniness, yeah? Although my glasses taste disgusting. After all that bluster, I ended up watching the stuffing video anyway because I was curious. And as it turns out, Woobles provided. I've already stuffed my little baby here. I did it kind of lightly because it turns out my normal method of stuffing, they consider overstuffing. It's interesting the things that they're mentioning as like, oh, you don't really want to do that. And it's like, I'm not really bothered by that. Oh yeah, you can see I moved the sticker to my shirt. I used my really good sticker skills to take the sticker off of the stuffing bag, and I'm wearing it myself. So proud. But there was one thing that the stuffing tutorial did not explain that I learned when I first was learning how to stuff things in it. So they were talking about using polyfill. And I mean, they provided polyfill here, but what they don't mention is sometimes polyfill contains like little parts like this. They stand out. Like, I don't know if you can see it, how there's like a part of the stuffing that's a bit shinier than the rest. That's this part right here. And part of what makes the stuffing really fluffy is you kind of have to pull that apart so it blends in with the rest. It's part of the polyester fill that didn't quite get carded all the way throughout the machine. And this way, you get a bit of a fluffier piece instead of like one really weird, odd piece on the inside, which kind of helps to fluff up your piece. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily show up in the final project so much, but if you have too many of those in there, it means you didn't actually go through and like pull apart different things to make it fluffy, because you don't want this to be like a dense ball like it is right now. Like, it came out of here, it exploded. You want to be able to stretch it out a little bit more so your piece isn't too rock hard, yeah. So yeah, that would be my one critique of their stuffing tutorial, but other than that, they did a very good job. Here's my little lion so far. I don't know if you can tell, but you can kind of see that the front V's are in front. which is different than how I would typically do things. So I actually watched their video on how to sew because I was curious how they got those fees on there without actually ruining them. Because if I were making this pattern without even paying attention, what I would do is I would flip it over so the other side was facing and then use the actual V's to be the sewing part to hook it into the yarn. But it's their pattern, so I thought I'd just follow the instructions as they mentioned it. And I realized I sewed them a little bit too far apart, but it gives it character. It's kind of how a lot of kits go, right? You're never going to get exactly what you see on the package. You're always going to get something that has your little individual flair on it. There was an instruction that kind of made me go like, ugh. I understand why the person said it. It makes complete sense and it's absolutely valid. So it said, like, don't be afraid if you sew in the middle. If I can try to, in the middle of the yarn like that, because it helps make it more secure. And the person was absolutely right about that. Make no doubt, they were. But here's the thing with this yarn. You can kind of see the hole never really went away. That hole is there now. That hole will not go away. It kind of just did when I pulled it like that. Wow, just proving myself wrong on that. Okay, but usually when you snag a piece of yarn like that, most yarn is like this and it's plied. If I go in between the plies, it doesn't actually it can deconstruct the yarn, but you're not going through the individual fibers. The yarn opens up and finds a hole for you. This t-shirt yarn doesn't do that. And there were several times I was using the stitch marker and the stitch marker was snagging it and forming a little hole. And I was like, no. Although I do now understand why the yarn needle is so big in order to accommodate an instruction that the person said to thread 2 of these through at once. You couldn't do that with a normal tapestry needle. You needed the big boy. So now it wants me to make the actual ears. And oh yeah, I chose this pattern because it looked like it had the most techniques and that was the hardest. So far we have not discussed the slip stitch. They used a tapestry needle to avoid going around the slip stitch when it came to fastening off. Although it was a good technique. They are showing good techniques here. And I have to fully admit, I am learning stuff. So far, I mean, this is as advertised. I also forgot to mention, they finally explained how to do the magic loop, which I decided to follow their method because I taught myself the magic loop. And I was wondering how it would be different. And their version is a little bit more secure, actually, because their version involves crocheting over the yarn tail while I don't bother with that. To be fair, I have an easier time with my version, but that's simply because of habit. But I'm very glad that they took the time to describe how to do the magic loop, because the thing that I was worried about when they gave the pre-completed circle, it's good to start with, but once you become more familiar with crocheting amigurumi, the magic loop is pretty much unavoidable. If you create the magic loop and then you finish it off and then you don't teach them the magic loop, how are they going to continue? But they did teach the magic loop. So I'm glad that it providing a way to do it. And learning the magic loop is a lot easier when you've already learned single crochet. I do have to admit that. Beforehand, it kind of reminded me of when people did plastic lacing when I was in the Girl Scouts and later on the Boy Scouts. They know how to do the stitch, like the box stitch or the spiral. But a lot of times they didn't know how to start it. My solution to this was I bought 20 of the little tool. I don't want to say the name because even though I think it's perfectly normal, elsewhere in the world it contains an offensive word. So I'm not going to say it. It brought a parallel to that. I finished my little Sebastian, which, compare it to this, I got pretty close. This was a much better kit than I was expecting it to be. I mean, I was still expecting it to be pretty good because they've been advertising for at least a year and I've been seeing this advertisement. It stands flat. I do think it could have been kind of cute if Sebastian had a tail, but that's not entirely necessary. When it came to the main, like, the main was good because, like, it taught you to work in rows, which is another way of crocheting, rather than just in the round. The video was talking about how if the main wasn't long enough, but I had the opposite problem, my main was too long. But yeah, that is a little lion friend here. It turned out pretty nice. My overall impression of this kit is that it is absolutely worth your money because I have half the stuffing left. I have at least half the yarn left. And they provided me with more stitch markers than you needed for this project. Plus, there's like a bunch of little extra bits, yeah? Like I now have an extra safety eye in case I want to make a one-eyed thing. Or if I want to use the nose. Use it as a nose on something, yeah. My impression with this kit is that if you don't know how to crochet, this will absolutely teach you. You will know how to crochet by the end of this. You won't know all the stitches, but you will know the basics. You will know enough to get you with any amigurumi project. And then you can learn the other stitches as you go. However, I think once you learn how to make the kit, the next step is to actually search out a pattern and work on a pattern. I do need to poke around the Woobles website a little bit more because I don't know if you buy the pattern when you buy the kit, if I'm able to access other patterns, because they do have a book out where you can make other Wooble patterns. Having looked at the Woobles website, I do believe there is a marketing place that they're missing. And that's in just buying the yarn by itself. Like, what if you don't want to make just a kit? What if you just want to work with the yarn? They say their yarn is custom made just for their kits. And I mean, they've got some sort of winding machine because this is a typical skein that you would, like, in the format that is wound by, like, a machine. It's like once you've gotten started with the Woobles and you moved on, what if you really like the texture of the yarn and you want to keep on going? By selling individual skeins of that yarn, I feel is a way that they could branch out. Probably like a simple 50-gram skein, kind of like this size. Yeah, oh, this is 100 grams. Sorry, 100 grams. Especially since it's definitely a thicker yarn. Now, if you are someone who uses the Woobles and you're not sure what type of yarn to buy next in order to move on to another simple project, I think a dupe of this would be t-shirt yarn, although t-shirt yarn does tend to be a lot bigger. If you want to ease your way into regular yarn, there's also worsted yarn. I would go for 100% acrylic to start out with because the yarn is so cheap that you don't really have to worry about messing up, which I feel like is something that people worry about. Also, the one thing I do have to say about this is they were very encouraging throughout the instructions of saying, hey, take a moment to celebrate yourself for reaching this far. And also like, hey, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes. It's very good that they're encouraging like that because I do know a lot of women my age and older tend to start getting wrapped up into their heads and thinking like, I can't do it. It's like, I'm not good enough. Absolutely you are. You are good enough to do this. As to whether I would make another Woobles kit, yeah, I would make another Woobles kit. Next time though, I probably would just go straight to the pattern. I wouldn't necessarily go through all the different videos, but because I was trying to find out what makes this such a good kit, I was pressing for the different videos. And I did learn some new things. I'm very appreciative that I learned the new things. Although, while some of the things I might carry through, like maybe for some patterns, pushing it inside out, I'm going to keep my stitch marker on the last hook. I'm not going to put it on the first one. That was just too much mental gymnastics for me, and I do not want to retrain my mind in that way. My way was already good. Yeah, that was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.